So am I here from here? Sorry, I can't open the video. I'll try to see whether I could open later. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Ma'am,
I think we are just a minute away from this session. So a few housekeeping rule. I will just request everybody that while you are not speaking, please keep your mics on mute so that we don't hear any background noise. And I think the record button has been hit. Keshav, are you embedding at the moment? You're embedding. So the moment we are live, I will go ahead and I will start the session. You know the house rules. So waiting to get started.
Keshav, the link on WhatsApp, please.
ma'am, I think we can begin, and it's our time is.
Great. Keshav, are we live?
I'm saying, ma'am, that we can begin, and it's just taking some internet is giving its own challenges. So,
no worries.
Yeah, but I just wanted to also, ma'am, very importantly, welcome our program advisor from Belgium, who is
okay.
Dr. Yorgos Kostakos, who had also sent his kind messages today, right? So, Dr. Yorgos, a very happy International Day for Non-Violence and Gandhi Jayanti to you, and thank you for joining in, sir.
The same to all of you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank
and
you.
I let you go. Yeah. I want to intervene. I have sent a message and I'll be in and out because of other business, right? If you need me for anything, you let me know. But I wish you...
Welcome, Yorgos. I'm the host of the session. So you'll... so
Good to meet you. Good luck with it. I don't want to delay you, really. It's a very important session.
Thank you. Okay, great. Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Rural Development Dialogue hosted by the Dais Global Voices program in collaboration with SBI Foundation and in partnership with the Taj University, Afghanistan. We have 3 distinct sessions for today. There are 2 keynote addresses and a panel discussion. And what the theme that we are going to be following is principles of rural development. But before we get started, I would like to spotlight on the thematic relevance of the event. The event is organized in commemoration of Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary and is also an occasion for observer. I'm a development sector practitioner and a management professional. I have been in the sector for about 20 years and I've worked on diverse social projects. I'll be your host for the event, and it is my great pleasure to thank Keshav Gupta of the Dais and Mr. Nixon Joseph of SBI Foundation to have invited me to host this noble cause. While it is my pleasure to welcome all of you, all of the great speakers and the experts, I will take a moment to set the tone of the session today. Towards this, I would like to actually invite Yish Sharma. Will you deliver your speech, please?
Yes. Hello everyone, I'm Gauri and I'm in the 7th grade, and I'm here to share a small thought about how Gandhiji would feel about today's world if he were alive. So if Gandhiji did come back today, he would have appeared at the state of our social fabric and the wide divide between the rich and the poor and the kind of false propaganda being pitched today. He had an idea of composite India, which was built on the strong foundation of truth. He might have been sad by the fact that corruption and violence are rampant even today. To be fair to the fact that India has achieved many milestones in 69 years of its independence, I think he would still be happy about the fact that today we are the largest and fastest growing democracy. he would have been pleased by the fact that there are still many unsung heroes who work towards India's growth by simply doing their daily jobs. And this would have been very proud for him because he left India and the way it's running today. The thing I loved about him is he would never be that happy what he happens with coronavirus immediately, never give up, and how much ever challenging it has been, he would never stop being really delightful, and he would have been very happy on seeing that families have started spending time with each other technology, not just seeing that children are on gadgets the whole day. He would have thought it a bit differently and seen that children are learning so much about technology and how it exactly works. I would like to conclude with saying an eye for an eye ends up making the whole world blind. Gandhiji. Thank you, everyone.
A very important message. An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind is a very famous saying by Gandhiji. And thank you for echoing that important message in the current situation. As the whole world is facing their own set of challenges, the health crisis, political crisis, peace crisis, I should say. But thank you, Gauri. And now we move to one of the most important sessions of today, which is the keynote address, where I like to invite Mr. Nixon Joseph, who is the CEO and President of SBI Foundation. He will be delivering the keynote address on the relevance of lessons of Mr. Mahatma Gandhi in 2020, as of 2020. It is my pleasure that to host Nixon sir. He is a seasoned banking professional, a financial expert, a literature major, and an experience holder in banking operations internationally. He is also a fitness specialist and a legendary marathoner. And there is a lot of inspiration that he emits just from his everyday work. So definitely he echoes a lot of Gandhiji's best practices and philosophy. Sir, I request you to introduce yourself by delivering the keynote address. But before that, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your journey, and a little bit about how you think Gandhiji, you see Gandhiji as your peer. So you have to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I first of all thank Dais India for organizing this webinar on a very important day of Gandhiji. Also, it's International Non-Violence Day, and there is no better day to speak about non-violence and the message which Gandhiji has given us. I'm a professional banker and now looking after SBI Foundation. To the question whether I have followed any of the Gandhian principles or whether I have practiced whatever Gandhi has told, I can only tell it is a big no. Because it's very challenging for human beings to follow what Gandhiji had taught or what Gandhiji had given as his life. He used to tell, my life is my message. But then for an ordinary person like me, I think I won't be able to practice even 1% of what Gandhiji was practicing or what he taught. I would tell that one or two things I can just tell I have peripherally touched. I was much impressed by the way Gandhiji used to walk very fast. His strides were very, very long. And people used to tell that if you walk with such long strides, it shows your energy. It shows your passion. And very often I have copied that. And whenever I used to walk, try to walk with long strides. that is one thing I think I have copied from Gandhiji. Okay, marathon running is something because I find that Gandhiji had placed importance on physical fitness too. Because the soul satyagraha, we see it is almost 26 days of walking. And wherever he was seen, be traveling all over India or various places I have seen is like I have read in the books is that he was walking all over to go to the villages, to experience what is happening in the villages. He was only walking. That means he was giving so much importance to not yes, fitness, I would tell, or taking care of the body. And as regards his food habits also, he was practicing simple food habits. I don't know whether I have been influenced by that. I can tell that maybe 1%, some days I would go for a simple food. Overall, what I can summarize is that Gandhiji is such a great person that they were telling that generations to come may scarce believe that such a person in flesh and blood ever lived on this earth. Of such a great person, I can only tell that I could try to copy 1%. That also I think is very extreme if I claim that. But then I have tried to do whatever is possible. I would tell that I was very impressed by what he has taught. And he has not taught anything new, I would tell. He was just telling what was already there in the books of the Bible, in the books of Mahabharata, in whatever religious books were there, where all good things were being taught. He had taken essence from all of this and was reiterating to us. The issue is that we Indians have gone away from Gandhism, from Gandhian values. Gandhi's iconic spinning wheel is nothing for us compared to the technological products which have been brought to us, be it the mobile or internet, etc. Where we are consuming too much, almost raping natural resources. Where is the relevance of the self-control which Gandhiji had taught? I can only tell that Gandhi is relevant not only today, but for centuries to come. But relevance itself is not what is relevant. The relevance is whether all of us will be able to practice at least some of the principles which Gandhiji had taught us. Or whether we could adopt some of the things at least which Gandhiji was living and showing as a model. I often tell that Gandhiji was stating that my life is my message. But such simplicity, such taking care of nature, such caring others, such levels of tolerance, patience, who is having in India today? So it is a very good topic that we have brought today, the relevance of Mahatma Ji during our times. Some of the lessons which he was focusing on by way of his life and by way of what he taught, I would just share so that we could refresh our memories. He was much against wealth without work, that is against easy money, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce, business without morality, science without humanity, and religion without sacrifice, politics without principle. But if we judge the current India against all these, what Gandhiji had taught, we would find that we have almost buried Gandhiji along with him. So the question today is how we will be able to remember whatever Gandhiji has taught, and how we will be able to practice or adopt some of these into our life. One of the main teachings which Gandhiji focused was change yourself first. That is a big challenge for all of us. We want everyone around us to change. We often complain about waste accumulating around our neighborhood. We complain about the government not functioning properly. We complain about offices not functioning properly. But we never think about whether we are doing things in the right manner. We never think whether we are changing ourselves to bring the change. Gandhiji was himself changing so that he could bring the change which he wanted. But whether we are ready for that, because being the change is a very, very difficult aspect. To the MC's question, whether I have adopted some of Gandhiji's principles, I already told I could not even reach 1%. But then being the change myself, like I used to think always whether I can change myself to some extent so that there will be some change. When I look back into my career, I can tell with conviction and pride that whichever role I have handled, I have tried to bring change within that role and within myself so that I would be a model, so that others can also copy or practice some of this. I'm not telling that I was a model to the extent of 100%, but then issues like when you are posted in the branches or in offices of the SBI, there are a lot of complaints coming that customer service is not up to the mark. But in all these issues, I have tried to address these issues. I have tried to be the change myself and then lead those who are looking at me. Like punctuality was something Gandhiji was so much insisting. I used to reach my office at least 1 hour before the office starts, and that I am still following. Also, some of the things like being in meetings, etc. on time, or being like keeping your words, keeping your commitments. All these are issues which Gandhiji was focusing on. And then these are some simple things which each of us can practice. We often complain about government officers not giving proper service to us, not functioning at the right time, etc. But then if we ourselves are able to do it, there will be at least one person who will be influenced by it and would bring necessary change. So, being the change. If you want change, you be the change. That Gandhian principle, I can tell, that also I can tell, I have reached like very extreme, I can tell 1% only. But this is something which I follow in my daily life. And being the change to that extent, I have been successful. One of his sayings was that an eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind. That's also something very true. But how many of us, how many of the political leaders, how many of the national leaders, how many of those who are in UN representing countries are thinking on those terms? Gandhi hated violence because he knew that the whole world will become blind if each person spreads the message of hatred and tries to kill each other. Another aspect of Gandhi's teachings which I like is that a man is but the product of his thoughts. What he thinks, he becomes. A man is but the product of his thoughts. What he thinks, he becomes. So if you think positively, you become a positive person. If you think negatively, you become a negative person. So we have to control our thoughts. We have to enter into a world of positive thinking and self-reliance. Gandhiji did so. We can also try. And it is possible also, because this is something which can be controlled by ourselves, that we should focus on positive thoughts, positive ideas, seeing the goodness in others, etc. Another aspect of Gandhiji's teachings, which I have liked so much and have been influenced, is believe in yourself. Gandhiji believed that by non-violence he would be able to bring freedom to India. He never resorted to violence in spite of the pressure on him. And finally we got independence. He believed in himself. So to many of us, when people tell that you won't be able to achieve something, we have to think this aspect in mind, this teaching of Gandhiji, that you have to believe in yourself. I have myself believed in myself. I would not tell influenced by Gandhiji, but because I heard about this only when I was reading about Gandhiji much later. But then I have tried, like I was introduced as a marathon runner. I will tell you, I believed in myself, because at the age of 45, if you want to run 42 kilometers, you have to believe in yourself. And I did that. Therefore, I have been able to complete 42 times full marathon, because I believed in myself. Another of his excellent sayings, which not only India, but the entire world should focus on, is earth was enough for human needs, but not for human greed. Earth was enough for human needs, but not for human greeds. Whatever we are facing today, be it climate change, be it the COVID pandemic, or various pandemics to come, or the climate change effects, all these are because we all are driven by greed. Natural resources. We have no pricks in exploiting natural resources. Even knowledgeable people, highly educated people who had qualified from reputed institutes, they were the persons behind the 2008 financial crisis. And what is the reason for this financial crisis? The greed of individuals. So Gandhiji had at his time mentioned about all these things and told all of us to follow these, only because he understood that living a minimalist life away from greed is the only way for the planet to survive. But we have been led astray by our individual greeds, group greeds, greeds of the countries, etc. And we have reached such a situation. Respect for women is one of the ideas Gandhiji had focused on. But where are we now? Every day we hear of atrocities on women, and especially when COVID has impacted everyone, we hear that domestic violence has increased. So Gandhiji is relevant in every aspect of our life, not only for Indians, but for people all over the world. Jawaharlal Nehru ji told immediately after Gandhi's death that the light is gone, and yet it will shine for 1,000 years. So I stop here by telling that the light will shine for 1,000 years, which only means that he's still.
Thank you, sir. That was quite an enlightening speech, as enlightening Gandhiji's life was. And I think each of the lessons that you drew were kind of universal lessons. I also heard several times in several universities where he has been a peace icon, that he's not seen as an Indian. He is a universal figure, and definitely the light will shine, whether we live or not, but the light will always shine with the philosophies that he has left behind. So having said that, I would have requested for questions from the audience, but in interest of time, I will say please hold on to your questions. We will come back. This entire session is about peace. It's about Gandhian thoughts, and we will continue with questions with all the panelists as we find more time. Having said that, I would like to just once check with Keshav. So Keshav, do you think by any chance you want to allow any particular participant who has been asking to ask a question from Nixon, sir?
Yes, certainly, Indrani ji. I think that in case we are joined in by many teachers, I can see Girl Up chapter from UN Foundation representatives and students, young people. So in case any of them have questions, now would be the time. We will take one question. So you could unmute yourself and ask your question very, very quickly.
Sure, we can take one question.
Yeah, only one question. In the interest.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Gauri.
I wanted to ask Nixon, sir, how important was education for Gandhiji, and what were some of his personal policies towards that?
The education was very, very important for Gandhiji. If you see his personal life itself, he was a lawyer. He went to US for studies, to UK for studies, and then came back. Started his freedom movement at the age of 45. Whatever Gandhiji is focusing on, be it education, be it employment, be it self-government, all are by within the Indian traditional systems. Instead of copying the Western style of education, Gandhiji wanted the education which was going on in India with focus on values and as well as a rational type of education as well. So I would tell that Gandhiji's education ideas for Indians were based on the long history of Gurukul system in India, the way Indians were taking care of their teachers, the way Indians were learning moral values, based on moral values. All these were very important for Gandhiji. I think I have answered your question.
Thank you, sir.
Keshav, do you want to, Keshav, can we take one more question?
Yes, certainly. If there's anyone else in our esteemed gathering who would like to ask any question, let me also in the meantime thank Nixon sir, because so I think many points that you touched upon are really, really relevant for all of us as an educator. I'm certainly, I call myself one, let's say. So a very, very important question also. Thank you, Gauri, and thank you, sir, for such a great answer to that. Any other participants? Would you like to ask any questions Arya is one of the students, ma'am, also with us today.
Great.
And Dr. Georgios actually also wants to ask a question. If Dr.
Yes.
Yorgos, would you like to make an intervention and ask your question, sir?
If I may, if I'm not taking anybody else's place.
No, please go ahead. Please, our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. In a way, this is an Indian event, but it coincides with an international event. And I wanted to ask also Mr. Nixon how he sees this, because it's easier when we have a model from our own background to be able to follow, or at least to get excited about it and really follow the teachings or the practice of that person. At the same time, we're one world, and we see similar examples of people from time immemorial, bright examples, exceptions, who teach us the way. And it is the same way, basically, how to treat others and how to treat the world and nature. So from your experience and reading through Gandhi's writings and life, etc., how did you see him seeing this, his connection to the world and to India at the same time, on a day that's both international and Indian? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Georgios. The Gandhi's teachings are relevant not only to India, but to the entire world. If you see the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all of them have been premised on the concept of self-reliance, sustenance made by Gandhiji. So be it climate change, be it waste management, be it treating others without religion, without caste. In all these aspects, Gandhiji's teachings are relevant all over the world. And that's why he is respected also all over the world. Gandhiji was like with us in 1948. Jesus had given a lot of good principles. Sri Buddha had given a lot of good principles. But then we can relate more to Gandhiji because we know that he was with us till few years back. And we know that he was moving like along with our own people in India. And he was one person who has taught us that in spite of being a lawyer who was educated abroad, in spite of having the opportunity to enjoy life in whatever way he wants, if a person is able to practice discipline, he can turn himself into a change which would inspire everyone. So Gandhiji is relevant all over the world. There are so many good people all over the world as well. We are also taking cues from all of them. But what separates Gandhiji is that he has given messages on every aspect of life, which is relevant for 1,000 or more years to come. And also what he has mentioned, what he has stated, what he has exhorted everyone to do are things which are possible, are simple, but because of our greed, because of our need for more luxury, because of our need for more comfort, because of like need to satisfy our ego, and also because of the consumerism in which we are living, we are not that much willing to adopt Gandhiji's ideas.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I think, and Dr. Yorgos, for your question. This really also puts a very important global context in many ways, where we can learn from similar examples like Nelson Mandela in Africa, and again, also Dr. Martin Luther King, who we are later on celebrating today along with Gandhiji for that culture. So, sir, thank you so much. We have, because you have made such a powerful, impactful speech, we have many requests. So, we will have one final question that Sameer Majliji will be asking, and after which once you have responded, I will request our Master of Ceremony, Indrani ji, to take the proceedings ahead. And from my end, my deepest gratitude to you, sir. And I feel deeply inspired listening to what you've said. So, sir, thank you.
Okay, if I may, this is not exactly a question, but it is something that is inspired by what Sir Georgios, I hope I get the pronunciation right, had mentioned. How is it relevant internationally? At present, I'm working on a project which is essentially a website which showcases the life stories of people who are into social welfare all across the world. So I'm sure that, if we are able to dig up such gems from across the world, lesser known people, I mean, Gandhi, everybody knows, we talk of Martin Luther King, but there are wonderful people in small unknown corners who are living out these principles all their lives. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring all those little unheard stories on one platform. The website will be launching this month, but if anybody wishes to partner with us for this project, we are looking for people to join because it would be a wonderful thing to do. You know, I just wanted to make this point because I think these principles live internationally. In small pockets, they might not be noticed, but they are there because I believe they are the essence of being a human being. They are the essence of answering to our own conscience. It's how often we do it that matters. So if we could take these stories to more people, I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. So anybody who is willing to collaborate, please get in touch with us.
I think that's a very strong call to action, Sameerji. And I hope that inspired from you and everyone else also, when they're speaking, a call to action and a potential way forward will be a deeply thing that Gandhiji would love if he is indeed watching us today. Nixon ji, just for context, really grew such people in all rural areas through the SBI Youth for India Fellowship. And we are so lucky to have two of the fellows, in the panel discussion as well. So I think we can get a quick remark from Nixon ji about it, and then Indrani Sharma ji, you can take the floor. And thank you, Sameer ji, for such a important sort of putting the idea on the table for us. Thank you. Nixon ji, please, sir.
Keshav ji, you wanted to know about the fellowship, or?
I'm saying that briefly, if you want to just give a very short context on how that fellowship is identifying similar people from corners and putting them with the young people to learn from through. So you could just, in a minute, maybe, sir, tell us a little.
Okay. See, Gandhiji told that India lives in its villages. And therefore, someone asked Gandhiji, told Gandhiji that he wanted to go abroad to study economics. Then Gandhiji replied that if you want to study economics, you go to our villages. So this SBI Youth for India Fellowship is a platform which we are giving to highly educated boys and girls to know the grassroots realities, to know what is India. Not India, to know what is Bharat. So this is a good opportunity for young people to know what is happening in the villages, why change is not happening in the villages in spite of decades of independence, in spite of crores of rupees being spent on various plans, and also what it takes to solve the issues in rural areas. And this is also encouraging youth to go to the development sector. Apart from that, our youth, many of them I find want to give back to society. Many of the youth feel that they have been fortunate that they got good education. They are aware of the fact that there are many people in the rural areas who are less privileged. So I find many of the youth want to give back to society. They want to resolve rural issues. They want to also understand what is happening in our rural area so that they can study more about it and bring solutions. And also many of the youths, they come from metros, cities, etc. And they go to these villages where comforts are less, where there are a lot of challenges. So that entails a lot of sacrifice also. Like one of the fellows who has come, Kavya, she was focusing on waste management in a village. That means you are having the passion to resolve the issue, and also an issue like waste management you want to solve. These are not areas where educated youths try to come. But then our Youth for India Fellowship provides an opportunity where youths can come and resolve the issues. Or even in the case of Sriparna, she was providing livelihood, like supplementing the livelihood income of farmers there in Koli Hills. So these are issues generally not addressed by many people, and this fellowship provides a platform for youth to understand what is happening in rural areas, resolve them, gain the satisfaction that they have been able to bring some change there. And that is also spreading hope. Because you go to, from urban areas, highly educated youth, they go to the village because they care for them. And that is a very like a strong message of hope, which the youngsters are spreading. And that gives resilience to the villagers in these areas. So most of the Gandhian concepts are also involved here. The element of sacrifice, the element of minimalistic comforts, the element of caring for others, the element of treating people with respect, irrespective of religion or caste. So all these, and also travel, like people go to villages where they are unfamiliar of the languages also. So understanding the diversity of Indian culture. All these are values which Gandhiji had promoted. And I always feel that our fellows can proudly tell that 13 months of their life at their prime age, they have sacrificed for the nation. They have contributed to the progress of the nation. They have also contributed their might in bringing about an Atmanirbhar village, Atmanirbhar Bharat. It may not be a huge change, but at least some change they have been able to do. And that message spreads very fast. See, one kind act spreads a ripple of hope. And when thousands of people do such kind acts, it becomes a strong wave. And that can improve India, that can make a lot of change in India.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was very insightful, and some of the some of the things that has been discussed is so contextually, I will say, evergreen. Be the change you want to see does not mean that be the change means like you have to. It's not just about big change making. Every day, the small changes also matter. And I think Gandhiji's life, he depicted at every stage what he wore, what he ate, the way he conducted himself. And one of the things I was just hearing his grandson today addressing a university, where he said he believed in dialogues. So he believed in having conversations. You cannot imagine just, you cannot imagine an idea and just say it's going to work without validating, without talking to people. So that's exactly something we are moving towards. Thank you so much, Nixon sir. That was so enlightening. And I think you did a complete justice to setting the context of today's session. Just to tell you, we all are live on Facebook and the audience is doing very well there. We're being received very well there. So thank you very much. And we are delayed by almost 20 minutes, but I think the conversation is going very, very well. So we'll go forward now straight into a panel discussion. Thank you, Nixon sir. And now we are moving to a panel discussion, which is thematically, the panel discussion is on the theme of relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's life and principles in rural development. We've got 4 awesome speakers for this session. We've got Samir Majli. He's the founder of Green Savior. We've Kavya Raman and SBI Youth for Fellow Alumni, who is currently engaged with Barefoot College in the Department of Waste Management, and Shriparna, Youth for India, again a Youth for India Fellowship alumni from SBI Foundation, and Mr. Prem Ojha, who is the principal of Gateway International School from Sonipat. So all of them are seasoned professionals from their arena, and we are going to be discussing about relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's life and principles in rural development. Now, rural development has been a context, or I think has been a topic of conversation most of the time whenever we are talking about progress of the country, because India is a country of villages. India is India's diversity lives in villages, and definitely when we think about progress of the country, whether we are leaping into the next millennium or whether we are thinking about emerging as a superpower, we have to think about villages. So having said that, I will first quickly turn to all the panelists and request them to quickly introduce yourself. I'm going to ask you some questions and then open the floor for more questions that can actually come from the audience. And Keshav, please look out for questions from Facebook also, if there are audience having questions there. But it'll be great if we can first hear who you are. Okay, so let's start with Kavya.
Thank you, Indrani ji. Hi, everyone. I'm Kavya. Very honored to be part of this talk today. I come from an engineering background, and then I did 3 years in decision sciences and analytics in Bangalore. 3 years later, I realized what I really wanted to do. So I came across the fellowship and immediately applied to it and got into rural development. And since then, it's been 4 years since I went into the villages of India, of Rajasthan specifically, and I just couldn't get out of there. I continue to work there, and I work on rural waste management, sanitation initiatives, and have had the privilege to go to different parts of India and work in different villages and absorb the cultures. So I have a lot to talk about the experiences, and glad to be here. Thank you.
What is that one thing that strikes you when you are in the villages?
Okay, so the first thing, every time I go into the villages, the first thing that happens is that somebody calls you into their house and offers you a hot steaming cup of tea. And it's just a sign of love and welcoming from their side, which I have never seen in any happening in any city that I've lived in all my life. So it's just very heartwarming, literally heartwarming. Yeah.
Great. So candid. Okay. Prem Ojha ji, you're the principal of Gateway International School. Can you quickly introduce yourself and your school and some of the interesting things that you're doing?
Namaste to all. As Indrani ji shared that I'm Prem Ojha, working as a principal for Gateway International School, Sonipat. This is a semi-residential school, and my call brought me to this profession. Being as an educator, I love working with my children, and that's what we are doing even at this point of time. A few students are also with us. We are working students to be a self-reliance, what Nixon sir said, and believe in themselves and believe in this particular thing that they can be the factor to bring a change in and around. So that's what we are looking forward. One thing, Indrani ji, I born in a small village of a state, Bihar. And one thing, as Kavya said, yes, the greetings, the feeling of belongingness, they do not see that whether you belong to that village or not. They believe that everybody who comes to that village belong to that village, and they treat you and respect you in that particular manner. For me, जो उस मिट्टी है और प्रकृति है, जब भी मैं गाँव जाता हूँ तो मुझे लगता है कि वहाँ की मिट्टी और प्रकृति आपको हक करती है, आपको बहुत सारा प्यार करती है, आपके साथ एक रिश्ता जोड़ लेती है. So that's what I feel, and sometimes I really miss that. One interesting thing which I wish to share with respect to the village, because you said, I was very happy when we first time, I was around 13, 14 years old, when we got electricity in our village. The first bulb, how the glow, and then the happiness, when we saw that the electricity came now. And then once the electricity came to our village, then it was an opening window for several rural development set of aspects. So we had TV, we had like light in the night, because we were not having light in the night. So that's bring lots of happiness.
Great, great. And one thing that you just said, what you miss, what one thing you really wish that village can gift to urban setup?
I think village can give a sense of that how you can live in harmony, harmony with nature, harmony with communities, and harmony. Well, like that's something what villages teaching,
Well said.
at this point of time. And of course, each one of us can grab this from our
Well
village
said.
life.
Well said. Well said. Definitely harmony. I'm turning to Samir Majliji. You founded Green Savior. Very, very, I think very contextually, it's a very relevant organization. Can you please introduce a bit about yourself and your organization, and
Yeah, hello.
something that you want to mention about villages?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Samir Majli. I'm essentially a graduate of chemistry who did about 2 months of research with Bharat Ratna CNR Rao as my guide when I was doing my BSc. Then I did my technology degree from ICT Mumbai. So I'm an engineer of sorts. Then I went to being an employee in a food manufacturing firm. From there to entrepreneur. From there into education, and now into environment sciences, if you may call it. So I've been through all the E's, and all of them are easy provided you put your heart into it. So Green Saviors is something that we founded in 2016 April, because it had not rained in Belgaum, and somewhere back in school we had read that if you plant trees, it rains. So this simple learning from school brought about this venture of tree plantation. We have been working for 235 Sundays without a break.
Wow.
So that is one thing that we are proud of. We have been able to gather enough volunteers. Also, there's a lot of community participation happening. And now that we have learned the fundamentals, we are all set to take the plunge and all set to do 1 million trees plantation for various purposes. Something which is close to my heart is the Western Ghats, much ignored region, although we call it heritage region.
Mm.
From what I have heard, Western Ghats regulates the climate not just in India, but even beyond India, right up to Siberia. So
Mm.
we have been ignoring the Western Ghats for a very long time. And that is the point of focus. There are a lot of villages in the Western Ghats that don't even have a proper healthcare system. I mean, there are places where you have to carry your patient for 15 kilometers
Mm.
on a charpoy if you have to get the person to a road.
Oh.
Okay,
Oh.
so there's nothing that is crept in there. When we embraced globalization, we thought it would change the nation, but I don't believe that it has worked out too well in the Indian context, because what happened is it brought in commoditization of everything, and now we have small commodities of packets being sold in the villages. So we brought the urban trash to the village areas. Okay, that's something that
So
it seems
right.
to have succeeded in.
So right.
We look at tree plantation as a method for empowering people in the region, because unless they feel empowered, they have no reason to stay there. And that is where I guess the Gandhian philosophy of strengthening India at its grassroots becomes important.
Correct.
Another thing that Gandhiji said was, I believe he was a man much before his time and much after his, because his principles were from an earlier era and his thoughts were for concerns for a later era. So one of the things that he said was, what we are doing to our forests reflects upon what we are doing to ourselves. And the after effects of that are being felt, you know, much after he left with his thoughts and left us with his thoughts. So thank you everyone for letting me be here. And Kavya, you took a plunge much early, so I envy you. I'm taking it at around 50 and getting into whatever social welfare full time. So I will always continue to envy you for that. Thank you.
Great, great. Okay, so we've got quite a good live audience, about 900 people watching us live apparently. So all of you are being heard well. And also something very important thing that you said, Samiji, is that, about Gandhiji, that also Gandhiji himself did not like. One of the things he did not like was material world. And that's exactly what you were saying. He did not like material world which had greed. I think Nixon ji also touched on that. So we'll come back to you. Shriparna, you are another young SBI Youth for India fellow and much fresh experience to share. So can you tell a little bit about who you are and where are you off to?
Yes, so namaste and greetings to all. And I'm like, apologies, I'm turning my video off for my bandwidth issues. I am Shriparna Sarkar, and I am a proud alumni of State Bank of India Youth for India Fellowship. And I'm a postgraduate in social welfare. And presently I'm working on the FAIR project, an initiative organized by 81 Goods Foundation and supported by UNESCO New Delhi. However, I'm talking in my personal capacity in front of all the experienced people here. I will share my experiences of living with the Malayali tribes at Koli Hills, Tamil Nadu. And I have been inspired not only by Gandhi all throughout, but also Lal Bahadur Shastri and MS Swaminathan, who was another Gandhian and who is the founder of MSSRF. And my takeaways from these three people and my own experiences regarding sustainable development or rural development, as we say, is first, battle against inequality inequality in all forms, like including gender discrimination. And all these three people advocated for science. So it is necessary to build up a scientific temperament while we are doing experimentation or whatever we are like in our interventions. And violence, including violence against nature. And most necessarily to follow an institutional approach to bring about change. And that's all about myself, but I would really like to thank Dais and Mr. Nixon Joseph for giving me this platform to share my experience with all of you.
Right. Shriparna, one thing that you really remember being in the village.
Yes, so the fact that I was accepted in all forms. I was an urbanite from a small town perhaps who did not know the nitty-gritties of village, and the fact that the tribal women taught me not to judge people while you are interacting with them. So I have perhaps learned how not to judge and just be myself, and the fact that I have started hearing more, to listening, the capability to listen more than just speaking. That's that one point.
Great, great. In fact, today only one of the forums I was hearing about the comparison between our current Prime Minister and Gandhiji, because both of them come from Gujarat. And one of the humorous thing was that somebody was saying that Gandhiji was a good listener and our current Prime Minister is a good speaker. So with that, I'll move to some of the questions that we have, and then I'm going to be requesting the audience to come up with the questions that you want to ask with regard to the theme. I'll remind you of the theme once again. We're talking about relevance of Gandhiji's principles for rural development. So I will start with the questions so that you can, if audience on Facebook or here you have questions, we can take them. So my question to you, the first question is for Samir Majliji. So innovation and technology interventions for agri-entrepreneurship are crucial. We know for every sphere, innovation and technological interventions have been key. Now, rural economies, if you look at a rural economy of India, it has been a contributor to the national GDP. Farm, forest produce, food processing, all of these have relevance to rural development. What do you think are the innovation trends you are observing currently that are underlying in both technology and management landscape of rural development?
Okay, as it had come up in some statement earlier, I think innovation is happening in pockets and it is being done by certain people, and it has really not spread out en masse. That is an issue of concern. For example, I have a friend of mine who's from the IT sector, one Mr. Chetan Desai, who's made it a mission in his life to try and convert as many acres as possible into natural farming. So he's working relentlessly on that in addition to his IT responsibilities. So we see small pockets where innovation is happening, but by and large, I think everybody is still deeply mired in traditional practices. And most of my learning comes from my experiences from villages in the Western Ghats, where there are multiple issues that are compounding the problem, but they just look at the problem without really looking at the solution. The most only solution that most of them are looking at is urban migration. And that is the talk in the particular village. So if you go to a village, in all likelihood, you will find that there are no youngsters there. The second thing is because of this particular lifestyle that is being largely promoted, something that reflects upon consumerism, a lot of materialism that comes in, and the uh, percolation, if you may say, of media deep into our lives. I think these youth are getting attracted, and they are this particular area that I'm talking of is right on the hills. So people from there move either to Goa, okay, or they move to Belgaum for jobs. So they don't really have that culture of continuing the agriculture or farming practices that have been there, primarily because things are very unpredictable. They're worried about unemployment. The second part of it is there are a lot of difficulties you can encounter when you go there. You try and bring about a change, and there are people who will make sure that it does not happen, because I believe village politics can be far more deep rooted than urban politics. And most of them are wonderful as individuals, but then when they sort of get together and they are influenced by other factors, things can become very complicated. So we are thinking of how to integrate our 1 million trees program, which is a startup kind of a thing for us, with rural empowerment or rural employment, so that more and more people can stay back. I mean, these are skills that are there in their blood. Why do you go and try and learn and imbibe something else? I mean, why do you teach everybody coding? They have a code that is deeply embedded within them. Just help them reach out to that. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to tell them that, come on, plant trees, we will pay you for it. Okay, plant trees, we will pay you for it. Make saplings from, because what happens is we get our saplings from forest nurseries. The species are not exactly reflecting the Western Ghats. There are definitely people in the villages who understand the trees in that area and can propagate them. So if we can have sapling nurseries in every village, plant those saplings in the same place for restoration, I believe we can generate a lot of employment around that. And there are a lot of such resources, medicinal and otherwise, in the Western Ghats, which are largely untapped. I mean, there's one species, Caria arborea, which has a derivative that can really be of great use in pharmacy. That tree grows wild all across the Western Ghats. Nobody even looks at it because primarily a fruit is not edible. Okay, so it is an evergreen species. So there are a lot of such species that are lost. I'm not really somebody who sometimes I consider overutilization of these species as exploitation of nature. I mean, once you get into environment, you sort of get there without you realizing it. But then I believe that there are a lot of these resources which can be used. I mean, every village can be a hub for one of these resources. You could grow them there, you could do some preliminary extraction there, sell it out in other spaces. And but it is also important to keep these in pockets, because it should not end up being like the other agricultural practices where one person grows tomatoes, everybody grows tomatoes, and nobody gets the prize. That is one kind of mentality that exists. So if you're able to break that, and the biggest challenge here, I think, is the mindset. And the only way we can break this is by taking up as small a village as possible, with as little local political interference as possible, develop that into a model village, and then everybody will fall in line. I mean, fall in line is a bad way of saying it, but fall in line in terms of doing good for themselves. And the Western Ghats are threatened. You see resorts coming up, you see road infrastructure coming up. There's just nothing holding things in place. We've had the Kerala, we have had the Kodagu, and it is all primarily because we have had plantations. Everybody talks to me saying the green cover has increased. So why are you saying there's a threat? We have had plantations.
Yeah.
But what plantations is as important as plantations only.
Correct.
Even in the tsunami in Japan, what was swept away was the foreign species, decorative species that were planted. This was reported by Akira Miyawaki, the founder of the Miyawaki method. He said all the local species had survived despite the tsunami.
Yes.
They are resilient to even something like a tsunami because they have been experiencing that for thousands and thousands of years. So they have built up a resistance. So in Japan, they are building a wall of native trees to protect Japan against tsunamis. We could propagate endemic species in the Western Ghats, get the youth involved through Narega or something of the sort, and keep everything intact. Otherwise, if Kodagu happens in the Western Ghats near Belgaum or the Konkan areas, you have whole mountains collapsing down. All villages will be wiped out. And I think it is there that we really need to make the impact with our tree plantation initiative. So we're taking care of their best interests. At the same time, we're taking care of the Western Ghats and contributing to reversal of climate change. That in a nutshell is, I guess, the philosophy with which we are going in there.
Great philosophy, great philosophy. And actually, I had another question for you, which by default answered. So it saves a lot of, I think, another round. But yeah, I mean, you spoke very well about innovation happening in silos, and there is a challenge of scaling those or bringing collaborations. And I also, do not appreciate some of the quick fixes that the government does time to time, from eras they've been doing, like the green cover. I remember in Gujarat, one of the times when I was in the villages, they said during the time, I think in 70s or 80s, when India was asked to increase the green cover, they simply brought weeds, or they simply brought like the thorn plants and spread it in the desert. And now, because of that, some of the fertile land has gone barren. So these are things, you come up with good policies, but you implement it in such lousy ways that sometimes it can kill kind of, a time period. But yeah, I'm going to come back to you, or maybe our audience will come back to you. But Kavya, I have a question, because you are in a village, Telonia. You are with Barefoot College, which already has benchmarks of innovation, and you are dealing with something very important that the world struggles with, which is waste management. So my question to you is that what benchmark you through your institution have created that you think are worth mentioning, worth replicating or promoting, where you, with specific examples, if you can say, which can actually attract collaborations.
Okay, sure. So on a philosophical note,
do you want to share screen? Sorry.
Yeah, Keshav can.
Keshav, because she's going to show us something which is going to be very interesting for the audience to see. Go ahead, Kavya.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the villages, one of the sessions we were having with one of the Gram Panchayats in the village. So on the philosophy that we follow is that no person or animal should face any kind of injustice or any kind of suffer in any way because of our actions. And unfortunately, a daily action of each of us of throwing our waste outside our house in some way or the other affects the environment, animals or people. And for me, it's a form of violence. I mean, if people have to sift through your waste and, go through a lot of people's waste every day, that's not a dignified livelihood opportunity. If it's lying outside and emitting methane into the atmosphere, that's not dignified for the environment. And if animals are chewing it and dying on it, that's not okay. So that's the underlying philosophy, that's the core that we talk about. And what we figured is that source segregation forms the most basic and first step to achieve waste management in the best form. So like you can see in the picture, this is Puranji and his son. He's one of the committee members who helped me set up the whole system in the first pilot village that I started in. And they say it's so simple. I mean, they say, I don't know, why can't everybody just do this? This simple segregation of dry and wet waste actually makes the job a whole lot easier, recovers so much resource, etc. So there are two processes. One is social and one is technical. So the social process is where we engage community stakeholders. Like Samiji was saying, that there is politics, there can be a lot of issues that come up. So you need to be very clear to create a committee which is inclusive of all the different communities and castes in the village. That's the very first step, so that you're accommodating for everybody's viewpoints and everybody's opinions. So when every culture gets represented, you come up with a more holistic solution. So that's the way we start. And then we train the committee on how to go ahead with the setup, which completely gives ownership to the people in the villages. So the whole setup is done by them. I'm not really doing much. I'm just enabling them, telling them you can maybe segregate, compost karo, things like that. But they're actually doing it. They're the ones practicing it every day. So that's on the social aspect. And that whole process at the end ensures a very dignified livelihood opportunity for the person who is collecting the waste. You can imagine if you're collecting perfectly segregated waste, it's a much better workplace to experience. Yeah, and this is Kishanji, who's one of our waste collection workers. Single-handedly, he is actually collecting and treating the waste of an entire huge village of a population of 3,000 people. And it's such an important job, so why don't we give it to them in the most dignified possible way? And that dignity comes through technology, I feel. And those technologies need to be really decentralized and really localized. So Keshav, you can go to the previous picture. The maximum amount of waste, the composting picture, the maximum amount of waste that comes out from villages, what we calculated in this particular village in Rajasthan was about 70% of the total waste. So we make compost out of it, a very basic technology followed by anyone who's into farming or has livestock. I learned it from them, and I just helped them to set it up in a centralized location. So what you can see is completely organic waste, which is composted month over month over month. And these small 4-pit structure can actually manage 70% of the waste of an entire village. So it's just as simple as that. That's the point I actually want to make. That's about the wet waste. And then when you go to the dry waste, the next picture, the recycling picture, this is tiles that we're making out of plastic. So there's most of the plastic and cardboard and all of that gets sold. We sell it. We don't try to do everything because at a village level, it's not practical or feasible to treat everything. But what we're left with, what doesn't get recycled, we have made collaborations with other organizations. Waste Aid is the organization that helped us with this technology. It's a very, very simple technology. You just need a metal drum and some plastic and some sand, and you just mix it in the right proportions at the right temperature. And you have these paving tiles. They're extremely strong. So plastic's worst quality is that it doesn't degrade, which is what we use to its advantage. And we make these tiles out of it. It's stronger than just the mud or cement tiles that are made. And we've tested the strength of it. It's pretty strong, and it has a local market. So we focused on simple technologies that produce products that can be absorbed into a local market. So these tiles are what. This is another innovation that we tried. This is an entire house made of plastic bottles and mud. There is no brick or cement used. It's completely devoid of that. So it was low budget. We had help of college students from Jaipur who helped us, about 170, who helped us make this structure. So there's a lot of such innovations. Again, this is not our idea. We just picked it up from somewhere in Africa. This was a followed practice. So these are all just things we've picked up from different places, some from the village, some from other places that we've seen. We've given this training to the people in the village to actually implement these ideas. So a community-centric social approach along with very basic local indigenous technologies has really helped push this system. And this is just this picture just shows the ownership of the community. They've themselves purchased these dustbins from us and have started segregating waste. And when you do things in a colorful, informative, sensitive way, people are happy to do it. They were really happy to receive the dustbins and actually start something new. So yeah, it's not been very challenging, actually speaking.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kavya. That was very insightful. I'm sure there are questions which is sparking in our audience mind, but I'll come back to you.
Sure.
I'll turn to Shriparna. So Shriparna, you are a SBI Youth for India Fellowship alumni. And you went to stay in a village after being brought up in an urban setup. So what in your experience and what are your insights in ways youth in India can engage in rural development, especially because there is a contextual gap in understanding? I mean, rural children definitely want to grow and progress and they want to come to urban, but do you see what has been your experience of the reverse? Do you see urban kids going to rural areas and wanting to live there forever?
Right. Thank you so much, Indrani-ji, for the question. So I'll speak absolutely to my little understanding that I have. That is, one cannot really consider youth to be a homogeneous mass. And one has to differentiate youth according to their interests, also their inclinations and their temperament. And I personally feel that there's an artificial division or a divide between the rural and the urban. And it also consists when we are talking about the youth. So we urbanites or metroites, as we say, like call ourselves, have this vision of rural India in a way that is consistent of ignorant youth. But that's no longer so, honestly. Because look at the levels at which the literacy has gone up, right? And in this context of urbanization, or even the way communications had spread in India, especially between the 2001 and 2011 census, and I'm sure the trend is still going on. And I don't think it does matter anyway, or it doesn't make much sense to talk about the compartments between the rural and the urban, and especially when we are talking about the youth. So we have to, and if we are contextualizing Gandhi here in that sense, so what is Gandhi all about? The little I know, and the reinforcement that happened after I went to Kole Hills is that to me, Gandhi was all about inequality. And inequality comes across all the statures, for example, birth, it can be of caste, class, race, creed, ethnicity, everything, even occupation at times, even class. And I put the whole thing between the urban and the rural, and even the farmers and the industrial workers in that context. Then I came across this man who is Lal Bahadur Shastri, who spoke of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. And if I have my own interpretation of Jai Jawan, and he of course says of armed forces, but if I want to talk about Jawan, I would talk about the youth here. And if I'm talking about Kisan, it's always the farmers that we're talking about. Then, fortunately, I went to an institution which is also founded by a Gandhian, M.S. Swaminathan, who talks about any intervention, and it's inclined towards being pro-nature, pro-women, and pro-poor. These are the three mandates of MSSRF. And all these three people believed in change. And change as in change to equality, but based on every other struggles to institutions. And by institutions, I mean institutions which are formed democratically and which are like formal. Can you hear me?
Yes, you broke for a while.
So while I'm talking about institutions are also about bringing about change through these particular institutions. And the first one relates to the autonomy, or rather the sovereignty of food, perhaps, like not only just of food, but also the sovereignty of choices. And what is that? I think if I take Gandhi, and Gandhi takes up from Tolstoy, if I'm not wrong, that, okay, people are entitled to make mistakes. I mean, yes, they do make mistakes and learn from them, provided they make their own mistakes and learn from it. And perhaps not pay for others' mistake in the bargain. And when we are talking about contemporary development planning, or rather development interventions, and I think it's going on for the past 5 or 6 decades. And for example, if a person is to be developed, that person has no little choice in himself or herself to be developed in the entire development process. It's just an imposition that happens most of the times when we are going for development interventions. And while we talk about peace to institutions is a very difficult process. And I think it's beyond the so-called Panchayati Raj systems in that matter. And since I was already working with farmers producer organizations at Kole Hills, Tamil Nadu, and this was my first time I got exposed to a village setup, to farmers and everything. So I internalized, or rather I had an introspection that all these three people visualize the role of youth. And youth have a tremendous importance in terms of recognizing their autonomy through institutions. And the role of a youth then becomes not only to mobilize, not only like just rooting for about a change that I want to change, but also organizing in a democratic and non-violent way. And while we are talking about mobilizing, while the youth is actually focusing on mobilizing, they should also engage in shared learning dialogues and not just going about a one-way dialogue. And
Correct.
I think we are the agents of change, and I think we should be the ones who should be living this change ourselves. That's all.
Sure. Great insights, Shriparna. So yes, I agree with you that there is a, I think, a disconnect between the youth in rural area and the youth in the urban setup, and there has to be dialogue, and there has to be mentoring. There has to be platforms where they can come and kind of, work with each other in collaboration. So well said. I'm going to turn to Premji. Premji, you are heading an education institution, and education is foundation of every life. Even if a person is illiterate, always dreams of the next generation to be literate. So what learnings from Gandhiji's life you think is foundationally relevant to be the core, to be at the core of students' development, to envision their lives as productive citizens of tomorrow, and also be the triggers of positive change? I know you have also got, some videos and some presentations. I'll request Keshav to support you in playing those as relevant. But first, I'll request you to address my question.
Thank you, Indraniji, and thanks to the Dais uh, that provided such a wonderful platform, not just to share, but listen, because listening is really enriching me today. And as correctly you said, that education, even Gandhiji shared that education can be the mean to transform every aspect. As far as an educator for me, uh, code learning from Gandhian learning or Gandhian theory or Gandhian principles as far as the today concern, which Nikshinji also put forward in a very simplest manner, believing in self. When a child believes in himself, can bring lots of change in future also. Despite of audacity, despite of differences, because being as an history student, I know that Gandhiji himself, being challenged by his near and dear one uh, at several times to change his stand, viewpoint. And one of the very interesting incident in history that during the non-cooperation movement, most of his colleagues and at that point of time, people believed that Gandhi should not have or would not have taken or called off that movement. But Gandhi believed himself, one. Second, not compromising with the values which I stand with. If I stand with non-violence, I will not compromise whatever, even at the stake of anything and everything. So that's what, as a student and as an educator, we believe that. Second, that whatever incident is happening, Gandhiji said that let's have a self-control, Swaraj within and Swaraj outside. So we'll talk about, as we are emphasizing rural development in Gram Swaraj, but there's a Swaraj, need of Swaraj within also, connecting with self and controlling self. Not only once we'll control self, maybe then we can connect it with self, we can enjoy with the self, and we can extend it to the extended self also. So I believe this. The another important is Swaraj within, self-control, self-reliance is something which are very important for today's generation as a student is not believing in need, because as Nixon just said, there's no end of greed, there's no end of materialistic world and desire. So rather than being like having so much desire, what is my need to live this contented life, at the same time with my need keeping view in this my need, at the same time how I can make change, bring positive constructive change, and can be a means of. So these are certain things which I believe that the core values and the core learning is very much foundational even at this point of time for our young generation, for who will be designing their society, their future together. And one important last, and then I'll look forward for the second time when Indraniji will come back with a question, then that believing in mutual respect for each other, respecting differences and diversity all across, not only within the country, but across the world. That's something which really need today. And then the peace can be maintained, not within our society, nation, and globally also. So, and then harmony can come. So these are the certain values, a foundational value, which I believe today are very, very important and significant for our children. Thank you so much, Indraniji.
And one thing that I will repeat, I asked you, what can be the triggers to ensure that the children whom we raise today are the positive change? I mean, they believe in change. Believing in change, let me reframe the question, is that today children are very aware. Information flows in them very easily. But I think action or conscious commitment to their action is both there, and I will say sometimes they keep thinking, what's right. So I will say that given that we are one of the nations with youngest population, we are not like Europe, which has only aging population. We have the youngest population. What can be the triggers for making sure that our students or our children are moving towards to be the change that will bring the change?
No, the one thing which really helped me a lot to understand my children and do work with them is that, as I said, the children, they need to believe in, but at the same time, we should also need to believe in them.
Yes.
That's something really important, that the belief that this youth can bring change and give them space, give them that opportunity, give them one. Second, very important aspect is accept them, their failure, their mistakes, because if you do not accept them, then everything, all those disorders starts. So I believe that our job is the jobs of educators and job of the the seniors one or the adult one to believe in the young and give them that space. So they will bring that positive and constructive change. That's sure.
Great insight. Great insight. So just in interest of time, there's one small change that we are doing. Instead of I coming up with my next set of questions for the panelists, which I have the privilege to do, but I think I need to pass on the buck to the younger generation to ask their questions. So I am actually passing the buck to Keshav so that he can pull questions from the audience, and we have time only for 3 questions. So Keshav.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And again to all the panelists for such wonderful, deep, very, very specific insights also, so that we can actually learn productive things to implement and think about real solutions. So that's something that everyone brought to the panel with them, and you have my respect and gratitude from our side for that. We will be allowing 3 questions. I believe Aditya wanted to ask a question because his college, he is in Goa, and he's from a leading engineering college in India, which is BITS, Birla Institute of Technology and Science. Aditya, would you like to come in and ask your question? You can unmute yourself and ask. I believe that Aditya has dropped out of the call due to some technical glitches. My apologies. Is there any other question that any other participant has? You can unmute yourself and you can ask your questions. Okay. While we are waiting our participants to ask questions, there is a very lovely video that Prem sir had shared with us for all our audience of the Fridays for Future Global Shoe Strike that was organized and led by young students representing their local issues. And the Dais was also a global focal point for that with Fridays for Future. supporting the shoe strike. So I'm very grateful to Prem sir for sending in the video, and I will be sharing it. After which we will be um, closing the panel, unless we take one or two questions that anyone might have, and then moving ahead. Prem sir, would you like to quickly give a 30-second context to the video?
Yeah, that's yeah. Thank you, Keshav. This video is that what as even Indrani said, that how this young can bring productivity in and can be productive and can bring the change. And this video will give just a small insight and a small example to that. And with the help of the Dais team in Keshav's mentorship, uh, Gateway International School is introducing the Global Dialogue Forum, a school dialogue forum on SDG issues, which will be completely students driven. And every month we are looking forward to have a one dialogue on SDG issues. Globally and locally, the issues will be taken and students will be having a dialogue and discussion across the nations. So we're looking forward to start this. And I believe that will be a very enriching session when the children will have discussions on common issues. Thank you, Keshav. We are introducing this and on this particular platform. So this is the launch of this forum also on this particular platform. Thank
Climate
you, Keshav,
change.
Thank you, Prem sir. I always love your campus because it's so green, and I also specially request all of you to watch out for the plants that are there in the campus and the greenery there is. So playing the video, and thank you to our students who have led this initiative on the 25th of September, which was the Global Shoe Strike Day. That was a call to action by Fridays for Future International, and as we all know, our beloved Greta had made that call to action globally. So thank you, Prem sir and institution, for also responding to that call to action. And I hope that we can all get inspired and take more calls such like that going forward. Thank you.
Change is the historical change in the pattern of average seasonal conditions. This change increasingly poses as one of the biggest long-term threats to nature and Earth. The lack of climate action on our part will lead to the collapse of our civilization and extinction of the nature. There is an urgent need on our part to take climate action.
So a very strong message coming from Sonipat at Gateway International School led by very young and let's say very inspiring leaders. And as you saw, that one thing I wanted to highlight while I moved the floor to Indrani Sharma ji is that that everyone was wearing a mask, and we saw that distancing and that challenge of COVID has how the school and the students have come together through the difficult time to really express their intent. Indrani ji, if I'm correct, and what an inspiring, and I see another one, Gauri, who had started off the session, I think, as well. So very great to see. And Indrani ji, I'm handing over the floor to you now.
Great. Yes. So I'm going to just turn with, I'm going to ask a round of questions to all the panelists and also request them for their concluding remarks to be included in your as in response to the question itself. So I'll start with Samirji this time. So Samirji, before you give your concluding remarks, do you have specific best practices from around the world that you want to share around rural development, specifically around rural development, that you think has created cases that is worth mentioning and something that the Green Savior has also adopted, with your concluding remarks?
Okay, I will be sharing a story of a friend from the US who's currently not stationed in the US but is exploring certain practices. The Green Saviors is in the process of taking these to the villages, is something that I can mention. If I can share the screen with your permission, I would like to show a little PPT, just about 3 to 4 slides.
Sure.
So I call this the Melvin Landers story, and I met this person courtesy Facebook. Now, he's an environment biologist who's into crop science, soil science, and paleoclimatology. He first he learned and taught his lessons on cultivation to the Amazon tribes in 1969. So you can imagine the amount of experience that goes into this. He was essentially exploring the practices of these natives before these countries were colonized, both in Africa and in America. And he came up with something called as making of dark earth soils. So he experimented on his own farm in the 80s and the 90s, and after working with Africa, he is now shifted to Nicaragua. And there he is building up agroforestry models, which is he's really open to share with anybody and everybody. Now, his methods have brought in excellent results even in extended drought times, and the technology is extremely simple. It is something that all our ancestors knew and adopted, but we have given up over a period in time. So he does what is called as raised bed farming, which can be easily done in any place. Now, in this place, he is using straw, but when you mentioned weeds some time back, once you get into tree plantation and you get closer to the environment, you sort of eliminate the word weeds because nothing is a weed. Okay, everything has its own role in nature, and the
Yeah.
role essentially is enriching the soil. So it took me some time to get rid of the word weed myself. So that's okay. So these are raised beds on which they do cultivation on any kind of a plot, and it really serves them well. Now, these are practices in Malawi, Africa, and if you can see, there is very diverse crops. So one of the interesting things about this is that there are about small patches of individual crops of about 10 to 15 patterns that are planted and subsequently harvested. But one interesting thing that Mel shared with me was a lot of farmers normally talk about pest attacks. Pest attacks do not happen on these kind of plots, is what he shared with me. And he says they don't happen because of the multiple varieties of plants, they sort of secrete certain aromas or scents which confuses the insect. So every species has its own predator. And because we have a mixture of these species, there's hardly any disease that happens on these plots. They've tried they've tried it out with different crops. Okay, there are some there's some stuff like ginger, cassava, and other things that have also been planted on raised beds, and the results have been fantastic. The photograph that we see to the right is that of annatto. We know it as a food coloring. And if we are able to bring in these value added varieties, especially in the rural areas, it sort of will bring life back into rural agriculture rather than monoculture practices where it is almost as if the entire village is planting the same thing.
Yeah.
So, uh, so this is something that we need to take to the villages. And one more interesting thing is everybody asks me if this is to be done, where do the trees come in? Okay, the trees actually come in and were part of our ancient practices, primarily because if you have trees within an agricultural plot, as people would normally not recommend, the roots of the trees provide food to fungi. They create the underground networks, and these are the fungi that will help you in retaining moisture, in providing nutrients, and increasing your yield. So we conventionally take off trees of a farmland plot, but agroforestry methods are proving it otherwise because diverse plantations with trees in between are what are essential. We need to really get this culture to the grassroots levels. Now, this is something that they practice, which is called recarbonizing the soil. And this is essentially what every conservationist is trying to do, trap as much carbon in soil as possible. So it is people like Mel Landers who need to get into different systems, into different places, and combine all the traditional methods of plantation with knowledge that is absorbed from these places so that we can have healthy plantation systems all across. So that is precisely what I wanted to, share as a story. But
As a conclusion.
yeah,
Don't worry, we can.
in conclusion, what I would like to state is that it is a long process of learning. We really need to understand a lot of variables before we get into it. But I guess we cannot really understand
Yeah.
it without getting into it. So that's the sort of a catch-22 situation. But let us hope that in different pockets we could fight this off and bring better sense to agriculture in the villages. We as Green Saviors are committed to this and committed to the Western Ghats and committed to, like everybody said before, creating a platform for the youth who want to get into social welfare to have a platform in a small place like Pilgam and say, okay, you want to get into education or you want to get into rural welfare, come and work with us. I think we can need to create such small platforms everywhere. Thank you very much,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Samir Machli. Kavya, Shipana, and Premji, I'm also going to be asking you your concluding remarks, but request you to keep your comments under 2 minutes because we have Professor Idris Tabassum waiting for his keynote, concluding keynote. But we have a video, a message to be played also. So Kavya, my concluding question to you, with which I request your concluding comment, is that understanding that rural waste management has significant relevance given the precedences of practices such as open defecation or stubble burning. Do you have any specific best practices from Thilonia that you want to share? And one message that you want to leave behind as call to action?
Yes, sure. So I think I covered most of the things in the previous answer, or I just want to add that people from rural areas are very, very open to ideas and open to learning, unlike some of the perceptions that we have before we actually go into such areas. So the picture you can see here is like a very, very, before we started the system, and anywhere you see waste, you will see animals there for sure. Birds and animals congregated there for sure. So we've been successful in clearing out all those places only because we had a completely collaborative approach where we took the opinions of the community first before going and telling them what to do. So listening to the people, and the organization I work with, Barefoot College, founded by Bankar Roy ji, who's embodied this principle that listen to the people on the ground, they have all the answers. So we feel like we have like great things to go give them, but we just need to be enablers and just get out the best things and create systems out of it. And what you can see here, the students, and these are like a few students exhibiting what they learned in one of their science fairs. So going through children, going through youth, going through different groups that are already formed in the villages, leveraging these platforms to drive your messages really works wonders in driving through. There's already a lot of institutions like women's groups and youth groups and a village trust, things like these, where you can really get things going. And even like the evening chats with the group of old men who sit and they're sipping chai, and they've been the most productive because they really talk about what they feel in those kind of informal setups. So just connecting, going, living, getting your hands dirty and working is what I'd say to create any kind of change in villages in India, and that sort of generates a self-reliance also in the villages. So that would be my closing comment on this.
Great comment. Thank you, Kavya. Resilience and self-reliance, very much Atmanirbhar theme. Shipan, I'll turn to you. One of the things that you were doing while you were serving as a fellow with SBI Foundation was working with the farmers group. Having said that, as your concluding note, if you can share what is the readiness of food technology or food processing for that matter, not so much technology, but food processing, which can actually improve the way farmers can, I will say, farmers can derive better value for their products. What do you think is the readiness? Do you think that they know and understand the food processing? And also, what are the gaps that needs to be addressed?
Okay, thank you so much, Indrani ji. So I think this is somewhat related to the first question. So at first we need to ask, food processing for whom? Exactly, whom are we targeting it towards? So I'll just tell you, when I went there at Kohli Hills, and I was an ignorant urbanite, and I thought that there were like the women there, the farmers, they were wasting jackfruit seeds. So it is true that due to the kind of commercialization that has taken place, many things are wasted. And as I dug deeper into the lives of these tribal women, I found two things. That yes, they do eat a lot of jackfruit seeds, but a certain portion they also throw away. So I had taken it into typically that it is something that is thrown away. I didn't know about these things. Then the women explained to me that why do they exactly throw it for? And they throw it on the ground basically. And simply because it acts as a fertilizer. And then again, these are also the places where a lot of other vegetables grow. There are a lot of small millets that are cultivated. And again, if we are talking about gender, it is a woman's domain again. They don't put any artificial fertilizer at all. And so that's when I understood the knowledge of these farmers, these women. And then again, we might take off from Gandhi or even Swaminathan about what is processing. And it's like institute processing, and it's about localized using of localized technologies. But yes, again, not necessarily like processing, not necessarily for the market, and also it was me who started experimenting technically. And I went back to my roots in rural Bengal. And I remember that my grandmother used to like use a bit of salt, and she used to roast jackfruit seeds. And I have never done that before, especially in an urban setup. So I talked to these women, I spoke, I experimented, and I tried out a little bit of like frying this jackfruit seeds with salt. But unfortunately, it did not turn out to be good, and we failed. It was not as good as I had like eaten it. So it was like after brainstorming and also talking with these farmers, they came up with an idea that why not sand? Why don't we use sand? So one day we got some sand, and some of them even got a walk. And after a few rounds of experimentation, we experimented. And mind you, again, Gandhi, Swaminathan, everybody were like people of experimentation. So we came up with these roasted seeds, which were actually relishing, and it was also relished by the children out there. And it's not only just the women. So this is a small example of, I think, holistic sustainable development, where we are minimizing waste, which Kavyadi is doing. And we are also like maximizing the kind of food intake, and also keeping in mind the nutrient content on it. And all these three people that I have been talking about since the beginning are very much for the market, but honestly not to enhance urban consumption at the cost of their own nutrition, the nutrition of the farmers. And their own nutritional sovereignty is above all, even the sovereignty of choices. So from what I learned out of my experiences, and I always started asking myself this critical question as an urbanite, that market for whom and at what cost, or even at what price? These people are so malnourished, so shouldn't they actually cater for their own needs first, their own nutritional needs? So that was what Gandhi was all about as well, if I'm contextualizing his Gram Swaraj. So if I'm looking in terms of promoting this, I have found there are some very indigenous institutions among these women that I have been working with, and they were often using these institutions to exchange labor. And I just worked through this entire mechanism to revive it. And now when it comes to the market, the FPO, the Farmers Producer Organization that I was working with, the people said that listen, you have actually introduced such a nice thing to us, and they are quite delicious. That's the main part, because food is above all. And the same thing got expanded to Little Millets, and they were of the opinion that, okay, let's eat first. And it's always that the producers dictate the terms and conditions. So, and Gandhi used to also, and if I'm trying to conclude myself, I would say that Gandhi, Swaminathan, and even Lal Bahadur Shastri, all three of them spoke of violence and violence of development. And this kind of development is actually, honestly, the three mandates that I spoke of earlier is now anti-nature, anti-poor, and anti-women. So I try to go back to my roots and try to just understand that, yes, exactly, it's quite COVID, that the women decide the amount of surplus now. They should also start deciding that whom they are selling the products to. And sometimes they even started dictating the prices. That's the most important part that I feel. And that's the most like noble part of the entire intervention even I have done. And honestly, I would say that hunger and malnutrition are extremely violent phenomena right now.
Great insights.
Yeah, and I think the entire point, I would just like to conclude by my little understanding and my takeaway is that begin by respecting each other. And let's not actually forget that there are 734 million people in our country who are still living below the poverty line, which is $2 per day per capita income. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so revival of indigenous knowledge, because we always have a feeling that, villagers always need to be taught. That's not true. We need to learn from them. They know much better and believe in their knowledge. The second is definitely to promote, whatever they are producing, they should also be able to consume, because otherwise they are not taking the advantage of the enriching nutrition that they are the wealth of nutrition they sit on. And also the fact that empowerment in the right sense to make decisions. So good insights, Shriparna. I'll turn to you, Prem Ojha ji, for your conclusions around the thought that how Gandhian practices can be promoted amongst children. We already see you're doing a lot, but not just you. You are one institution and you probably are touching a few lives, but you're also part of an ecosystem where education institutions you probably are collaborating with. So what are those best practices that
Prem sir, please
like to
go ahead.
promote by showcasing certain?
Okay. Indrani ji, one thing which I always believed in, that whatever, for example, any philosophy, any good things need to be implemented, it should be integrated in your core curriculum in the school. And I request all respective school heads who wish to do, or the institutions, it should not be in a set of activities, but it should be part of core aspects of your curriculum. So the one thing which we have done is that we have integrated these aspects, and that's how we are doing it. As far as the implementation concern, how in small practices can bring lots of changes. For example, if my children, they start cleaning classrooms, so this itself will teach a lot to them. uh, you know uh, and just taking care of their respective belongings. So because if you see Gandhian life and Gandhiji, and if you visit Sevagram, so what he taught through his acts, that these small changes, small things can bring a lots of change in the society and can change one individual. So what we do, that we have integrated all these aspects within the core aspects of curriculum, can be implemented really well. That's what I believe. Uh, and another request, that let's do not make any principles too complex, that people get afraid of even talking and imbibing it, or even going near to that principles. I think what Gandhi did was very, very simple. He said that I have learned so many aspects from my civilization, cultural roots, and he said, let me practice it. Then he practiced it, and then when he practiced, it's become a principle for others. So I believe in the same manner, each one of us can start practicing these, all those value which we had from the edges, and which will remain, edges till the time we have the humankind on this planet. Thank you so much, Indrani ji. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you so much, Prem sir. And I think that there is.
Thank you. That was awesome. That was awesome. Are you able to hear me? I'm sorry. Okay, so thank you so much. I think it was an awesome panel discussion, and sometimes, the time that we allocate is never enough to finish everything that we have on our platter. But I would like to thank all the panelists for your wonderful insights and sharing with us your experience. I would like to quickly move forward to the second last concluding session, which is the much awaited keynote address, which was part of of one of the important part of the today's session, which was observing the International Day of Nonviolence. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Idris Tabassum from Taj University, Afghanistan. He is an academic vice chancellor, an academician, and also a master trainer at GIZ, who runs workshops, advocacy workshops. He has also been a lecturer at the law school and in political sciences. So he definitely is an expert in law and political science at various institutions since 2014. And so we welcome you, Professor Tabassum, and we invite you to deliver the keynote address on International Day of Nonviolence.
Thank you. Thank you. Also, Idris ji, before you begin, let me just firstly extend our warmest wishes from India to everyone in Afghanistan, and thank you for being that representative with us. I wanted to quickly set a context for Sir's remarks, specifically because I have the privilege of calling him a colleague and a partner and a collaborator between our attempts to do work with India and Afghanistan with the young people. So today, being the International Day for Non-Violence, as Dr. Yorgos had previously mentioned in his question as well, the International Connect. I will just quickly, he has given us a 1-minute message as a context-setting message, even for the consideration of Dr. Tabassum. And I think that I would like to begin with just simply saying that Gandhiji had said that I'm prepared to die at any point, but there's no cause for which I'm prepared to kill. Very powerful message and deeply tested, especially in Afghanistan. So Dr. Idris, I'm going to play a very quick video for your, and I request all of you to, I call your attention to the screen, and then I request you after the video to kindly begin your remarks, sir. And we are very, very excited. And thank you for joining us today for this session. So I'm just going to share my video, all of you. And now this is Dr. Yorgos, our esteemed program advisor and the co-founder of FOGS, which is based in Brussels, and he's previously worked at the United Nations, and right now they work in global governance and sustainability. And yes.
Over thousands of years, human history has been written with blood and destruction. At the same time, there have always been bright exceptions, individuals who managed to advance their ideas and to improve the state of humanity by non-violent means. We have such people in our recent past, like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela. We want to follow in their footsteps and build a better world for ourselves and the generations to come by peaceful means, with love and construction, not hatred and destruction. And we stand in solidarity with people like in Belarus, who are standing up for their democratic values, in the US and elsewhere, who are demanding racial equality in practice. Happy International Day of Nonviolence.
Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Yorgos. And now, Dr. Tabassum, you may unmute yourself, your mic, and you can begin your remarks, please. Thank you.
Really, thanks for the Dais to have made this platform to share my ideas through, in a way. As I was introduced, my name is Idris and my last name is Tabassum. I come from Afghanistan, a country in the south of Asia. I have been an academician since 2013. So I've been in different stages of academic. Right now, I'm the Vice Chancellor Academic of Taj University here in Afghanistan. Taj is a private university established in the year 2009 in Balkh state of Afghanistan. It's among the top rating universities in northern of Afghanistan, facilitating quality undergraduate education in faculties of medicine, economics, law, and political science. It's the first higher education institute or university in Afghanistan that was founded by a female founder, Miss Simin Shams. And the vision is to foster quality and education rights for Afghan female population by nurturing the talents. In a way, as it's clear, the International Day of Nonviolence is observed on 2nd October, the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, leader of the Indian independence movement and pioneer of the philosophy and the strategy of nonviolence. But please let me recall one of the quotes from Gandhi that says, I offer you peace, I offer you love, I offer you friendship, I see you beauty, I hear your need, I feel your feelings, my wisdom flows from the highest source, I salute that source in you, let us work together for unity and peace. This gives a big message to all the humanity, wherever we are, whoever we are, and what we are for. The United Nations created the this International Day of Nonviolence to reaffirm the universal relevance of the principle of nonviolence and to secure a culture of peace, tolerance, understanding, and nonviolence. The first International Day of Nonviolence was celebrated on October 2007 at the United Nations. Now let me define the nonviolence. As Professor Jean Sharp says in his book, The Politics of Nonviolent Action, the title is, I think. Nonviolent action is a technique by which people who reject passivity and submission and who see struggle as essential can wage their conflict without violence. Non-violent action is not an attempt to avoid or ignore conflict. It is one response to the problem of how to act effectively in politics, especially how to wield powers effectively. So non-violence is a philosophy, an existing theory, and a practice, a lifestyle, and a means of social, political, and economic struggle as old as history itself. It provides us with tools, positive means to oppose and stop wars and preparations of war, to resist violence, to struggle against racial, sexual, and economic oppression and discrimination, and to seek social justice and genuine democracy for people throughout the world. Let me tell you a story of nonviolence in Afghanistan. It was in 2018. A suicide car bomb hit a stadium in Lashkargah, one of the capital city of Helmand province in Afghanistan. The attack killed dozens of football fans who had gathered in the stadium to watch the game. A number of civilians who lost their dear ones in the attack sat in protest to criticize the attack. The demonstrators made specific demands. For example, observing ceasefire during Ramadan, relaunching ceasefires, bringing into existence a political setup that is acceptable to all sides. These activists made a 700-kilometer journey. Now I'm telling you this story, which is really amazing, and which is the headlines of which was the headline of the news for a while. After protesting from their tents in Lashkargah for over a month, these protesters, the marchers continued to hold meetings with youths, tribal chiefs, religious scholars, and ordinary people from Helmand. On May 13, 2018, 70 marchers started to walk from Helmand towards Kabul, growing to a few hundred over the 700 kilometer distance is not so easy, I think, marching 700 kilometers. Participation of other Afghans on their way in Kandahar, Zabul, and Ghazni, the provinces of Afghanistan, diversified the peace march and energized each other. I think once they reached Kabul after a 40-day walk, full of hardships, full of I think the hardships, the marchers after the hardships, the marchers erected tents in Kabul. From there, they issued press releases and talks to the other people, giving the messages of peace, collaborating, hugging each other's like that. In addition, they made the headlines in national news also, and to a limited extent in a way. Overall, this was a launch. This was a march, a non-violent movement. We could call it the Helmand Peace March. Is an unprecedented non-violent movement in recent Afghan history. Impacts of the movement, we can say the march has channeled the voice of ordinary Afghans who want peace. The movement was able to overcome ethnic and linguistic. Let me call Mr. Keshaf, if possibly you could share the photos, or I could also have that. This, the first photo, which shows the starting of the march, the people, the people who are gathering together in order to show. Mr. Keshaf, if you possibly show, this picture shows the march starts from Kandahar, from Helmand, and going to Kabul, and these are the a caravan that that says let's stop violence and come talk with each other, negotiate with each other. Anyway, the impacts of the movement, the first impact was that the voice of ordinary Afghans who wanted peace. The movement was able to overcome ethnic and linguistic barriers and prompted similar marches in other parts of Afghanistan, which affected every youngs in Afghanistan. Apart from women's participation, the movement also brought representation from Afghans of all ages, even disabled persons joining the march. It was also inspiring the other people. The marchers' courage demonstrated to young people their ability, how they felt, what challenges they faced, and how they defeated the challenges, the threats, and how did they overcome the problems and to convey their voice to the government. Anyway, with this story, if possibly, I could tell that the non-violence march can have some strategies. See, the peace march needs to have a well-defined strategy that includes at least their goals, vision, tactics, communication mechanisms, resources, and new recruit training. The second strategy for non-violence, which is not a simple job, the movement needs to diversify their tactics to exert more pressure on the warring parties to scum their demands. The third one is to intensive public outreach is needed to attract more individuals. It means at the end of the day, the numbers should increase, and the proper structure and well-defined leadership is also needed. Anyway, the philosophy and principles of nonviolence, which we get from the story I said, the first principle we can call is nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. I mean, this kind of launches, this kind of marches and nonviolence really require dare. So this means that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. It needs courage. The second principle is that nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. It doesn't need conflict. It doesn't need physically coming with other people. But with talking, you can do everything. With your tongue, you can do. With your heart, you can do things. The third principle is that nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not the people. It means that wherever the injustice is, the nonviolence wants to repair that. It does not mean to change the people with physical actions. It needs to change the injustice to bring reforms in the mindset of the people. Nonviolence holds that suffering can educate and transform. And the other principle is that nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. And the last principle of nonviolence is believes that the universe is on the side of justice, that everyone wants justice. Leave the weapons, leave the physical and harshness. Please come and talk with your heart, talk with your tongue. There are some also guidelines for nonviolence. The first guideline is that our attitude will be one of sincerity and respect towards the people. So we should have sincerity and respect towards those people that we encounter during our marches, during our nonviolence, for example, gatherings. The second one is that we will not engage in physical violence or verbal abuse towards any individual. As the march of the Helmand, I said the story started from Helmand towards Kabul. They faced challenges. They faced different people. They respected people. They showed sincerity to all of them. They didn't engage themselves in physical violence. They said everything in verbally to every individual. The other guidelines of nonviolence that we will not carry any weapons, no weapons, but through negotiations, through carrying the voice. The other guidelines of nonviolence says that we will not bring or use alcohol or drugs other than for medical purposes if we need in order to cure, or maybe if we use drugs for medical purposes, then it's no matter. Otherwise, no alcohols, no drugs during the nonviolence process. We will clear blockades to allow emergency vehicles, not police. We don't use force, so not police. The force is not allowed, but the force of tongue, the force of hearts, in order to fight against the injustice around the world. So we need to come up with some of these situations. And if possibly, in the end, I would like to call for action. It says that march, organize, and speak out for a new culture of nonviolence, for an end to war, for an end to poverty, for an end to racism, and for an end to environmental destruction. Thank you very much from the Dais. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you, Professor Tabassum. That was amazing. That was amazing and so relevant. You are saying things in context from Afghanistan, but it's globally relevant. Thank you very much. And I'm sure everybody who is watching us live on Facebook, please do visit the Taj University website. Professor Idris Tabassum, if you can put the the relevant websites on the chat so that our audience can definitely go and visit some of the great work that you're doing. And thanks for sharing those amazing pictures. Pictures actually say 1,000 stories. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And just as a concluding note, I definitely want to ask you one question, is that today, Gandhi Jayanti is a celebration every year. Did you make any resolution, or does it remind you of anything personally on this day?
Well, yeah, probably I can recall those moments that Afghanistan people passed decades of war, maybe past the darknesses. So this can take me towards the moment that I was not led to educate, to freely explain myself, and also to express what I have and what I can manage for myself in order to be in the future. I think the second of suppose this day is the day that we celebrate also Teachers' Day. As a lecturer, I urge the students on to kindly, to heartily celebrate that for their teachers, for their lecturers. In a way, I think the period that we had those opportunities in school, that we went to our teachers, we kissed their hands, we saluted them, we said heartily that with these moments we remember those darknesses that once we didn't have access to education, but right now, God willing, we have come to a situation really sitting on the chair or sitting in front of the students, talking with each other, conveying the message that please educate and sacrifice for your country with your education, with the knowledge you acquire with in yourself, and congratulate your teachers for their sacrifice. People, most of the students here in Afghanistan believe that the teachers are those candles that they melt, but actually they enlight the environments or around themselves. Like that, teachers need for a congratulations more than anything else. Not celebrating that, not any of the expenditures. Mostly in Afghanistan, which is a poor country, and the people also really don't have that ability to celebrate this. Mostly families of Afghanistan are affected by the COVID-19. Most of them are unemployed right away. Most of them are waiting for a better situation. That's why I think they cannot afford that. But my message is that what I feel about my past was something else and my present is completely different. And God willing, we're looking forward to have new stages of life, bright futures and successful periods of life.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. We all in the global south countries have faced similar situation at different stages and different periods of time, which is, breaking the shackles of colonization, fighting for rights, fighting for light. And teachers have definitely played, and academics have played an important role. Teaching is supposed to be an evergreen noble profession.
Yes.
And every country and every, I think, teaching is something which is gender agnostic. It is religion agnostic. A teacher is a teacher. And I personally think that, until I was in school, university, I always knew there is a teacher to keep me on track. And I miss that so much. I
Yeah,
definitely
really,
miss that so much. So thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. And today, I think it was a 90-minute session. You will not believe it. We've crossed 100 and I think almost 120, more than I think 120 minutes. And
Yes.
our audiences have stayed with us. We have more than 1,500 people watching us live. So thank you to all the audience who've stayed with us, given us encouragement, so many comments, so many questions. This one event was not was not the only space where you could actually interact on these topics, but the Dais has opened a kind of Pandora's box. Continue to engage in call for action, continue to engage in conversations. Non-violence has different connotation across different societies, different population, but I think we definitely demystified a lot of thoughts that people, the current generation, a lot of people think about Gandhi. He definitely had practices. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi was called Mahatma because Mahatma is a saint, so he had a vision of a saint, very selfless. And that, I think, will always shine out irrespective of era. Now, having said all of that, I think because all of these spiels were so powerful, without repeating, I think the Dais will have the recording of the session so people can go back and review it. But I would like to pass the mic back to Keshav Gupta, an amazing founder of the Dais. And thank you, Keshav, for bringing everybody together. This was an amazing forum. So over to you for a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think just continuing and wishing firstly Dr. Tabassum a very happy Teachers Day. I think I see you and Prem sir on my window as Prem sir and I go back a decade now. When we first met, and he was a teacher and not a principal with administrative duties, so it was a lot more fun also to do a lot of things together in that different relationship. So just valuing that relationship with everyone who came today, either as participants or as collaborators or as speakers, Facebook Live, if you have heard us today, it signifies two things: that you have affiliation towards nonviolence, you have some relationship with this man called Mahatma Gandhi, and and I can only reach out to you and say that once the pandemic also finishes over, right, tides over in person, if we can work together, all of us, in any way, with people at the heart of its consequences of that action, it will be very amazing. I am also happy, like it's always bittersweet when things exceed their time. So don't worry. We are coming up with our second celebration from Eastern Hemisphere, now moving towards the Western Hemisphere, with a stupendous, inspiring dialogue, starting 3 p.m. Till 4:30 p.m. in the Pacific Standard Time. So that is about 8 a.m. in Canberra. So if you're in Australia, in the Pacific region, over there as well, it's a very friendly time zone. I request all of you to log in, and we have some powerful speakers in store that include Dr. Claiborne Carson from Stanford University, who actually is the editor, founder, I mean director of the projects of the letters. of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. So we are celebrating the same celebration here. We are taking that party ahead, let's say, to across the seas, and there we are contextualizing the discussion with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi, and we will be joined by international musicians who will be talking about music as another non-violent means of communication. We are being joined by Dr. Carson, as I've said, who will be talking about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King in 2020 as Mahatma Gandhi. We also have an inspiring female motivational speaker who is a survivor of the Rwanda genocide from the Tutsi community, who will be talking about non-violence. And again, I'm so happy that in this process, we have managed to get the voices from these two very, very important, complex, raging regions of the world which need significant attention. So with that, let me just thank Indrani Sharma ji, firstly, our Honorable Masters of Ceremony, right from curating the flow to just supporting us and guiding us in the entire journey, despite her very important commitments. So I would like to wish her best. Today she's also starting critical online seminars for many universities globally. So my best regards to ma'am. To our esteemed keynote speakers, Nixon Joseph Sir from SBI Foundation, India, and then we had Dr. Idris Tabassum, Vice Chancellor Academic from Taj University, Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan. We also had an absolutely inspiring context setting statement, which came from, I think, the most important speaker on the entire panel, which was Gauri at the very beginning. So thank you, Gauri, for being as amazing as you are. I think I was nowhere close to that confidence level. So I would probably not even be on the Zoom at all if I look at my own age. So you are already the shining light that we are all talking about. So is Arya and everyone else who has joined, young girls from our beautiful Indian country. Then we also had a beautiful panel discussion, very in-depth, very, very important, I would say, to any listener on rural development, different facets of it, different contemporary challenges that are right now facing us and that will keep facing us as we move ahead. Waste management is one of the biggest challenge and an opportunity that we see moving forward globally because of the rapid urbanization of rural areas around, because of the modernity context, modernity biases that we have sometimes of urbanization. We had some very important call to action from Prem sir. So thank you, sir, for that. Kavya, for your presentation from Barefoot College. And then we had two, again, very, very insightful presentations from Samir Majli ji on tree plantation. I think it's an issue that is close to my heart as well, because I believe that COVID might go, but climate crisis is a bigger wave that will attack us in a very bad way, especially the vulnerable communities, especially in the more climate sensitive biodiversity regions. And then we will blame them later on for our losses. And with that, so that was a very critical presentation, Samir ji. Thank you. Many people on Facebook also were thanking you. Similarly, we had Sriparna Sarkar, former Youth for India fellow, currently working on the art project with the UNESCO India team, the Delhi cluster. So all these remarks are important, and I hope that when we move ahead from here together, we are able to mobilize towards the people. And finally, just my last remark, a reflection on non-violence would be that each of us, I have understood, is not only facing a challenge of non-violence in society, but within ourselves, whether it's anger, patience, anxieties, mental health, and to everyone, it's a different struggle. And once that struggle could be achieved inside of us, as UNESCO's preamble states, that the war begins in the minds of men, and it is in the minds of men that we need to combat these wars first. So to humbly acknowledge that this COVID pandemic has created multiple opportunities and temptations for people all around the world to have non-violence in various facets, whether it's lack of empathy towards people or selfishness, even, or too much material at the cost of biodiversity. But then the shining light is all the responsible COVID responders, frontline warriors, doctors, educators, government officials, administrators, I think around the world, who have tried to their best of their ability to use that resilience. People like Indrani ji, who's also managing another thing, then managing this Zoom, then a house, and similarly Prem sir doing the same thing, everyone doing the same thing and coming together. And I think just finishing on that Gauri's statement about what would Gandhiji say probably if he were alive, I could say that maybe from this discussion, if he were in this discussion, he would probably be a little happy that there are a few people trying to follow him in some way, in their own way. And with that, Swaraj, as Prem sir had said, is inside of us also. So acknowledging that, thank you all. And this dialogue will also be put on YouTube, and we will be sharing every detail on our pages now. And same with the speakers. You can email us at contact@thedais.in or our page in case you want to know more detail about the projects that they're doing and if there are collaboration opportunities. So I highly request, advise, encourage everyone around the world to reach out to these wonderful organizations, speakers, inspiring youth also to get engaged with. So thank you once again. Have a wonderful day ahead. And we wish all of you safe health, firstly, prosperity, and that today we are able to do something, and we continue to do that every day for the people, to the Jan, as Gandhiji used to say. And I think when he said Jan or Vaishnav Jan, the philosophical, as for me, the ties comes from Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is also Vasudev's. So when he says Jan, for me, a lot of it also includes the whole world, which resonates with the Indian philosophy. And again, with deep ties to Afghanistan, India, all the people who came in, it has resonated. So thank you, Indrani ji, for all of this. And once you say the word, I will conclude this. Thank you.
A big thank you to everybody and a big inspiration, Keshav Gupta. Continue the good work, continue to bring such wonderful people to give this kind of an experience. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.